Comparing ratios is like watching two different people talk. If they speak different languages, that doesn't make a lot of sense. If they're speaking the same language, they both can communicate, and you can understand what each one's saying or represents. In order to get our ratios to speak the same language, so to speak, we need to find common denominators. In order to compare ratios, you need common denominators. They're the key. This will require us to tap back into those fraction skills. Step 1, when I'm given two ratios, in order to compare them, I need to find the LCD, the lowest common denominator. In order to do that, I'm going to list out my multiples. It's like skip counting. So for 8, it's 8 times 1 is 8, 8 times 2 is 16, 8 times 3 is 24, 8 times 4 is 32. I'll do the same thing with 12. 12 times 1 is 12, 12 times 2 is 24, 12 times 3 is 36. I want to find the smallest number, the first number that pops up in the list of multiples like that. In this case, it's 24. Now that I know what my final denominator needs to be, I need to make equivalent fractions with this new denominator. You can either set up a proportion with 24 as the new denominator and cross multiply, or if we look at the multiples of 8, 24 is the third multiple. So I'm going to multiply top and bottom by 3. Same thing with 12. 24 is the second multiple, so I can multiply top and bottom, my numerator and denominator, of the ratio that has a denominator of 12 by 2. When I multiply those, I get 9 24ths and 6 24ths. Compare the ratios by looking at the biggest or smallest numerator. It all depends on which one they're asking for. This question asks which is the smaller ratio. So 6 to 24 is a smaller ratio. If it asks what's the bigger ratio, we would have 9 24ths as the bigger ratio. Which ratio is smaller, 1 to 6 or 5 to 18? We start by finding common denominators, so the lowest common denominator. I'm going to multiply out my multiples of 6. 6 times 1 is 6. 6 times 2 is 12. 6 times 3 is 18. Same thing, I'm going to find my multiples of 18. 18 times 1 is 30, or is 18. 18 times 2 is 36. I see 18 in both lists. I don't have to do anything for my ratio of 5 to 18, but my 1 to 6, because 18 is the third multiple in that list, I'm going to multiply my numerator and denominator by 3. Other side, I don't have to do anything, but it's really thinking like multiplying by 1. Find my equivalent fractions, and then I just have to compare the numerators. I'm looking for the smaller ratio, so the smaller numerator is my answer. In this case, the ratio of 1 to 6, or its equivalent 3 to 18, is the smaller ratio. We'll have you try the next two questions and then answer the think, pair, share question. Do you need to have lowest common denominators in order to compare ratios? Another way to compare two ratios is to make a percentage out of each. Since ratios are just fractions, we know how to turn a fraction into a percentage. We've already discussed how in order to compare ratios, you need common denominators. We also know percentages all have denominators of 100. So if you turn your ratio into a percentage, you're automatically creating a common denominator of 100 every single time. We start this process by turning each ratio into a percentage. There are two different ways to turn a fraction into a percent. We can either set up a proportion with 100 as our denominator and an unknown or variable as my numerator. We cross multiply. 100 times 5 is 500. Divide by the third value, so the denominator we already started with. So 500 divided by 17 gives me 29.4%. If you use this method, it automatically comes out as a percentage. There's a more calculator-driven method. So we could just divide 8 divided by 37 in a calculator. That gives us a decimal answer. So I need to turn that into a percentage by either multiplying by 100 or moving the decimal place to place values. So we get 21.6 as a percentage. Once we have both ratios represented as percentages, we just compare the ratios by looking at the biggest or smallest percentage. In this case, they're asking which ratio is bigger. 29.4% is bigger, so that means the ratio of 5 to 17 is the bigger ratio. Let's apply this same method to the ratios of 3 to 7 and 32 to 56. We want to find which ratio is smaller. I'm going to apply the calculator method, so I'm just going to take my first ratio, 3 to 7, and divide 3 divided by 7 to get a decimal of 0.428. Shortcut is move the decimal 2 places to the right because we're multiplying by 100. I'm going to get 42.8%. Do the same thing with my second ratio. 32 divided by 56 gives me 0.571. I'm going to multiply by 100 or move my decimal 2 place values to the right. That's going to give me 57.1%. They're looking for the smaller ratio. The smaller percent, 42.8%, belongs to 3 to 7. So 3 to 7 is the smaller ratio. 32 to 56 is the bigger or greater ratio. On your own, try the last two problems.